Cameron Heyward expected to make $22.4 million in 2024. Is he worth it? That's what we're talking about on this latest episode of Steelers Touch Down Under. I'm Matty P, as always, on Steelers Touch Down Under, covering all our shows. Right now, the Steelers off-season has begun. We finished the Mike Tomlin press conference. We're now moving into things like draft prospects, draft process, Senior Bowl, and we're moving into a period where there'll be a lot of discussions around free agency, what are guys worth, who should be brought back, who should be cut, and which free agents should they go after. So really want to kick it off with Cameron Heyward. A lot of discussion about him in the last couple of days, but I wanted to get into a bit of the dollars and cents in terms of this. A lot of people look at the production. We're going to look at that production. We're also going to look at that monetary value as well that you get from Cameron Heyward. Does he deserve that $22 million? There's a lot of different schools of thoughts around the Steel fan community about it. Let's dive into it. Let's get in there. Let's get a bit of an educated not just have guesses. Let's get a bit of education on it. So I'll try and keep this as pretty simplified as well. So Cameron Heyward is meant to make $22.4 million, second highest payer on the roster, about $1.1 million ahead of Minka Fitzpatrick, a whole $7 million ahead of Deontay Johnson, who again, he may or may not be on the roster come the 2024 season, but obviously less than our highest paid player in TJ Watt. $22 million is pretty substantive amount of money of a cap. The rumor this year is that the cap will go up to $240 million. So that would put Cameron Heyward about 8 or 9%, depending on where it actually falls, of the Steelers' overall cap to spread across the 53. Plus be able to have money to do other different things as well. So that's one thing you got to keep in mind. That's one thing that I think a lot of Steel fans are jumping on. Does he provide you? The defense will get more than half the money given the way that the Steelers have structured their roster right now in terms of a lot of draft picks on offense, a lot of young guys on offense, a lot of cheap guys on offense, having the second most expensive paid defense. And Cameron Heyward is a massive chunk of that defensive amount, which I think is in the $140 millions in 2024, pending a lot of the different changes that may happen to the cap as player changes happen. So I'm going to credit over the cap with all the numbers. We always credit Pro Football Reference unless we're using PFF, and most of my numbers will always come from Pro Football Reference. They're the two that I trust. Now, Cameron Heyward, one thing that's pretty interesting to do is to compare him to other top 10 defensive ends or defensive tackles. Now, Cameron Heyward is a defensive tackle in a 3-4, which often mirrors, in terms of the pressure that they can put on the passer, what you get out of a defensive end in a 4-3. So that's why some of this is very hard when you look at stats and contracts, is depending on the website or depending on the platform you're using, they will do different designations for different players. However, if you compare him to 10 like-minded defensive ends, and this is what they had an automatic one. I didn't even have to just pull these up. This is what over the cap pulled up for me. And when you look at the Commanders, the two guys from the Commanders in Payne and Allen, when you look at Javon Hargrave, who we know, when you look at Aaron Donald, when you look at Quinton Williams and Dexter Lawrence, these are similar sorts of guys to Cam Heyward in terms of how they play the game on their defense. Now, Cameron Heyward has the co-second earliest deal with Leonard Williams. It's important to mention this because obviously as the salary goes up, also with the COVID situation, that's going to affect what guys got paid per year. So Chris Jones signed in 2020, Leonard Williams signed in 2021, Cameron Heyward signed in 2021. It's the start year of the contract, I should say. The year of signing is usually the year before, but in terms of the start year of the contract, because that's how you've got to look at it with the caps. Now, age at signing. Cam Heyward was the oldest along with Aaron Donald, but Aaron Donald signed a 3-year deal. That's important to keep in mind because you've got to look at longevity. And these deals back then did not include void years. But if you look at the total pay, it's $65.6 million. So that's the least amount out of these, the second least amount out of these guys. But Leonard Williams signed a 3-year deal. So it's important to look at, because of the way over the cap does things, average pay per year. So across the 4 deals for Cam Heyward's deal, including 2024, it's $16 million. So obviously it goes up each year. I've actually got those incrementals down below. But basically it goes up every single year. That's kind of the interesting element of it, because at the end of the day, for the Steelers, it's important to honor last year of contracts, because if you don't, the way the Steelers do their bonus, where they guarantee the least amount of money, almost in the NFL, or usually in the NFL, that's going to affect how you're going to sign guys. I'll give you a good example. So Cameron Heyward signed that deal. The total guaranteed money was $20.25 million. That was 30% of the contract guaranteed. if you look at everyone else in this list, the guarantee percentage, the closest next person is Javon Hargrave, who was an unrestricted free agent and older as well. Hargrave, I think, was 28 when he did his 30. There you go, 30 when he did his one. Jonathan Allen was 26, so still young. But some of these guys getting 75% when you're talking about Chris Jones, Leonard Williams, 71%. Cam Heyward got a full 30%. So if the Steelers want to continue to do their piece where they don't fully guarantee a deal or guarantee a deal to less than 30 or 40%, which is rare in the league, they can't do things like not pay the guy in his last year. That's a really crucial thing. The other thing that I thought was very interesting when you look at this is actually the contract structure. So the Cam Heyward signing bonus was really low, which talks to what I've just mentioned there, because the guys signing bonuses, you guaranteed money. Really low from that. But he also got paid part of a roster bonus, but that changed when they did some playing with his contract with restructure as well. So that's kind of thing. The thing I wanted to also show you is how it goes up each year. Year 0 being the way that they forward pay the bonus. That's kind of interesting as well, just from a sort of side point of view. But then the question begs, well, what did Cameron Heyward do in 2023? How does that just adjust for 2024? What does that mean? Now, Cam Heyward certainly has had a really cool career for the Steelers. You can't doubt that. 159 games started out of 194 games that he's played in. Pretty amazing from that perspective. But what I wanted to do for this, he's got over 80 sacks. I don't want to switch out the screen, but he's got over 80 sacks, a heap of quarterback hits, all these things, made a bunch of Pro Bowls, he's been an All-Pro, all those different things. Comeback Player of the Year, was ranked up Comeback Player number 4 in 2017. Like lots of different good things from him. Never got to an AFC Championship game. That probably holds him back in terms of Hall of Fame. But in looking at 2023, let's look at his production per game, because obviously he missed a number of games. He only played in 11 games this season. So that's the other thing you've got to factor into this, because when you only play in that number of games, it affects what you're going to be able to produce, right? That is what it is. But if we look at the per game stats, so pass defense is something you're really not going to rank a defensive end on, but just so that he's famous for being able to do that to over the last couple of years. Pass defense per game is 0.06. It's 0.09, sorry, third worst of his career. Sacks, right? Last year, he averaged just 0.62 sacks per game. So it's every two games he's getting 1.2 sacks. This year, he's way down the bottom at 0.18, a third of that production. His tackles are way down as well. He's starting to get to career lows. Now, he's 34, going on 35. That's what's going to happen. That is going to happen as you get older. And yes, he took less money before to get money now. And that's an interesting situation in itself. And as I said, no wonder he doesn't want to make less, because he's been promised this. This is the way it's worked. He's sacrificed now to earn money later, particularly when Big Ben was on the roster. Tackles for a loss as well. 0.55 versus 1 in 2017, or last year, 0.82. So he's dropped off 30, actually that's over 30%. He's dropped off 50% almost in terms of his tackle for a loss per game as well. His quarterback hits, he's literally getting 0.27 per game in 2023. And yes, it does make a difference when you can't sustain your production and what have you. And when he came back from the groin, the other groin hurt. And I will say, I'm someone that's torn the adductor in my groin. I'd say a year, right? I don't have access to obviously the pro medical. I'm also not playing pro football. So this is no slight on Cameron Heyward's commitment to the team. It's just, this is what was produced on the field. Quarterback hits, low, as I say, low 0.27. And his AV per game, which is the approximate value that Pro Football Reference assigned to every player by position, and it's weighted, was 0.45. Now, last year it was 1.07. Last year it was 0.65. But the years leading into that, it was generally a little bit higher, getting toward that average of about 1. As a career average of 0.63, I might add. Now, that's kind of interesting because he had an AV overall of 5 this year. He's got a career AV of 122. He kind of needs 140 to sort of be a pretty good showing at the Hall of Fame. And so that's going to be kind of interesting to see, when that question comes, when he does eventually retire. But I've given you some per game stats. You kind of go, Matt, well, hang on. What does that really translate to contract value? So let's jump back to over the cap. So over the cap, do a number based on PFF. Now, I know a lot of people out there don't like PFF, but they do a thing called evaluation, which is available to subscribers like me, paid subscribers. And they base it on average pay per year against PFF's numbers at the position of the rest of the league, right? Now, that doesn't equate for differences from 3-4 and 4-3 defensive schemes, but it is because that's just a lot of data to get into, and that might get a little bit particular, especially because guys switch between 4-3 and 3-4 teams as well when they sign new contracts or they go into free agency or they're traded, obviously. Now, his OTC evaluation for this year was $3.227 million. So he made his average pay per year, and we know he made a little bit more, is $16.4 million in 2023. He made, based on the average pay per year, he delivered value of $3.22 million. $3.22 million. Now, that was an average. So if we look at it per game, he literally made, because he went out early in week one, $721,000. That's the value he delivered per game. He played like a $721,000 player. When he came back, I think that was the Titans game. Off the top of my head, I think it was the Titans game. He made he played to the value of a $7.87 million player. Dipped a little bit the next week by about 10%, 7.1. Following week, he played like $11.6 million player, played like $11.34 million player. Then he did back again, played like a $7 million player in week 13. And he went way up again in week 14, played like an $18 million player. Now, if he's making the average of 16.4 per year, even in this year in 2024 at $22 million, if he's playing like a $15 to $18 million player, you probably sit and go, well, hang on, you're getting your contract back paid. The Steelers don't pay a lot up front. The back years are always paid more. You know, that you probably can accept that. You probably can accept that sort of 15 to 20% difference in between his performance. And I think you probably even realistically do 30%. But you're not going to get away with things like 5 million, 3.8 million, 5.4 million, 11 million. Like, even that's a bit too low. But look at these blue dots in the way they're mapped. A lot of them are below this $7.5 million mark, or just above. You're not going to pay 3 times over that in 2024 for that. The Steelers are just not going to do it, particularly with Omar Khan, dollar and cents guy analytics. So then that kind of begs the question, well, how much would you pay him? Now, Shannon and I talked about this on the Global Perspective last week. If you missed that, go check it out. Wide-ranging show, all good things. And I said the way that I felt the Steelers will likely deal with it is via a void year, possibly an optional extension. And Shannon said to me, he hates void years, and effectively it's robbing Peter to pay Paul. That is true. I do not dispute that at all. At all, I do not dispute that. However, what we feel about it doesn't necessarily mean what the Steelers feel about it. The other thing too is you can only, with his contract, right, he's guaranteed his bonus. He's guaranteed his bonus, which is $6 million plus, right? When we go back all the way back to here and we look at Cameron Heyward, if you look at it, it's $16 million is his cap number. So you've got to do something with the $16 million in his base salary that you can touch. So if you cut him right now, you get the bonus, you get the dead hit of $6.4 million, you free up $16 million on the cap. So really you're looking, how do I spread $16 million, right? Now there's a couple of ways you can do this. You can do this via the void years, as I mentioned, and you could sign into an extension. So here's what I did when I played with it, because you're not changing the pro rata bonus. I cut his number back, right? I cut his number and I put his base salary back to like $2.5 million. Tried to make it like quite minimum. I wanted to pay him over $10 million, and I didn't want to defer more than $10 million. So what I basically did, and this is where they can be creative, and I'll tell you why, right? This is not what I'm predicting they're exactly going to do, but this is a way you could tackle it, right? You probably tackle it with 2 voidable years, and so he's just off contract this year. But I looked at how you keep him on. This is what I would be saying to Cameron Heyward, particularly if the Steelers go deep in the playoffs in 2024, but they don't make Super Bowl. So you go in and you say, right, we're going to re-sign you, we're going to extend you for a year, and we're going to add a voidable year. Now, we're going to extend you via a year at the vet minimum, but we're going to make the bonus across that next year of contract and the voidable year cover the contract number, the remaining contract number from this year, right? So we're going to basically give you $12 million across 3 years, 2024, 25, 2026. to back pay you the lost amount of salary. We keep you on the roster. We know you're not going to play at a vet minimum of 1.255 in 2024, but we can negotiate that then. And the bonus for the Steelers, if he goes, I don't want to do 20, so at the end of 2024. So the bonus is if he goes to the Steelers, well, I don't want to play in 2025. If he retires, they hit the cap. They get a cap hit of 1.255. Excuse me. And then you have the voidable year of 4 million. Now, look, I don't want voidable years of 10 million. I don't really like voidable years of someone's contract that are more than like 10, 20%. But this is a fair way to treat Cam Heyward. I'm not saying I love it. I think the Steelers have been put in a certain position here, but I don't think lumping $22.4 million in 2024 is feasible. Likewise, if you cut Cameron Heyward, that gives someone else the chance to come in and offer more money. And a lot of people sit there having seen the $3.2 million valuation, seen the stats, he's having the third or fourth worst year of his career in terms of numbers, and he has had a stellar career, so you've got to put that into context as well. And the fact that he's been a cheap paid player, you open him up to being taken by the market. And as I say, some people might be like, cool, do it. A lot of people like, no, we don't want that. Cam should be a steal for life. So there's a lot of different things you're balancing. But if you did something like this, then this is pretty creative. Like adding a void year is not creative. Adding 2 void years is not creative. But extending him a year at the vet minimum, where you then can renegotiate in 2025, because Cam Heyward's not playing for $5 million in 2025, particularly because remember, $4 of that million is actually back paid so that you could lower his cap number this year. But that is something that you could do. So if we hit the transact button on that, then you start to see what his cap number goes down to 12 million. And that puts him behind guys like Ogunjobi and Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson, I don't see him on the roster. It puts him just ahead of James Daniels. It puts him just ahead of Chooks. I don't think Chooks is going to be on the roster. It puts him a little bit more than Isaac Siamalu. It brings him way down that list. And so it should. Really, the 4 best guys on this roster right now should be TJ Watt, Nick Fitzpatrick, Deontay Johnson, Alex Highsmith. That is fair. On this roster, that is fair. And even then, you might say Deontay Johnson earning a lot. And Highsmith's kind of been on that too, but we're dealing with him in a few years when Cameron Heyward's off contract, so it's less of an issue. But that is one way you could deal with Cam Heyward. Sign an extension for 1 year of the vet minimum, spread spread $10 to $12 million across 3 years with a voidable year. And then that's how you keep him on the roster. That's how you keep him happy. And you still have the option of him playing in 2025 if he thinks the Steelers are going to play pretty well and go all the way. And you're only hitting, we're still paying him in 2026, but it's $4 million. And as I said, remember, the cap is projected to be $240 million this year. Over the cap, have it at $244 million. It'll fall somewhere around that. 2025 goes up to 260. 2026 will be 284. Even let's say it's only 270. $4 million is a very small part of that cap versus what it is in 2024. But yeah, let me know in the live comments. Let me know in the comments, not live show. Let me know in the comments. What do you feel Cam Heyward should be paid? Has he earned the right to earn his $22.4 million in 2024? Or do you think the Steelers should look at doing something like using void years and extensions to keep Cam Heyward on the roster, but it'd also be viable to the team and free up money for them to use elsewhere in free agency and re-signings? I'm Matty P. As always, go Steelers.